Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We've got a couple more people coming in. Thanks for we might get started actually. Guys, look, thank you so much for joining us. Really excited to be able to talk through this today or go through essentially from complexity to insight, 5 top tips to turbocharge your real-time Genesys analytics. My name is Scott Ward, and I'm going to get into the people that are going to be talking today, but I might just set a quick context if that works for you. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this fella, fella by the name of Usain Bolt. So he was kind of a world Olympic champion, world record holder at one point. He still might be actually, I'm not sure from a running standpoint. Anyway, the thing I find fascinating about this bloke is originally if you look at him, we all see him on the podium winning like the gold medals. But as a school student, he was also, I mean, he was a good runner, but his time in running was 20 seconds and 20.13 seconds. Now, his Olympic record or gold medalist was 19.3 seconds. And what I find fascinating about that is like he spent like from the time he left school to the time he won that Olympic gold medal, he spent something like it was 6 years, and it was an estimate 7,821 hours of training just to lose 0.83 of a second. Now, the reason I'm telling this story today is because, a couple of things. One is that we look at these people at the finish on collecting the medal without actually thinking about all the activities they've gone through in order to get there. But also, I think the other thing this story tells us is there's often not a lot that separates, say, a school class person from an Olympic gold medalist, right? And I think it's part of what we're talking about today is making sure that we're working on the right things to drive the right outcomes. And quite often, it's those minute changes that we make over time that actually drive the impact. So, and what we see within organizations, particularly around analytics, is that there's a real spectrum of maturity in market. So this is sort of the maturity curve for a CX-led business. And what we see within organizations in sort of the early stages, it's really conversations around like nascent is around how do we benchmark ourselves to understand our competitive position? How do we modernize our CX efforts? How do we know who our customers are? What is a CX-led business and how do we know it works? Then goes into, well, how can we use our data to get a view of our customers and how do we know what to measure, right? We often see early stages, it's kind of we don't know what we don't know. And so it's really trying to pull together the views of our customers using our data that allows us to then start to ask the next level of questions around, well, how do we track them between channels? How do we ensure we're building capabilities that relate to CX and our bottom line? So how do we make sure we're getting that ROI? How do we align measurement across the business? So then we see, that suddenly the silos start to haunt us. So how do we orchestrate across it? And then start to think about, well, how do we make meaningful improvements using those measures? Then we see organizations coming around, bringing the data together, systematizing the opportunity, like the identification, prioritization of CX, needing that single view of customer. And really what we see is as you go through this maturity, there's key milestones that drive the next unlock, right? And that bringing together that single view of customer really is a massive unlock that then cascades into things like, well, what's our operating model need to look like? What do we need from our knowledge? How does AI work and how do we identify and cater to the emerging real-time needs of our customers? And this is kind of like from the gold medal standpoint, we often see people on the stage at events talking about their cutting edge practices, but really a lot of the learnings exist within the maturity or the journey they've taken to get there. So just before I go on, guys, in the chat, I'd be really interested to see where do you guys see yourselves at the moment from an organization perspective? Are you 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Like where do you guys feel that you guys are currently up to? Just pop something in the chat. That would be great. Do you guys have access to the chat? Is the other question I should be asking. 3.5. Thanks, Steve. 3.5. So you see in between emerging and advanced. That's good. Any others? 1.5. Oh, Nathan, early stages. So you're early out on this journey. That's great. Thank you for that. About the same, Lisa. Yep. Okay. So I've got a few 3.5s. That's pretty good. Look, it's all like everyone's different, and even the cutting edge ones have to work to stay cutting edge. So today we've got the best panel ever. We've got Paul from MYOB. Now the reason we've got Paul in today is MYOB doing, I believe they're doing really very well in this space, but they haven't always been, right? They've really gone through this journey, and Paul's got the benefits of the lived experience of what it's like to bring that to life. We've also got Fong, who joins us today. Fong works at Customer Science. He's a guru of all things analytics, and he works across numerous clients to help them build out their maturity in terms of the things that they're looking to measure. So he's got a really good left-to-right view across the market. And my name is Scott Ward. I look after the product at Customer Science. So we've got an analytics product that we build out. But yeah, and so that's sort of my perspective. Realistically, I'm just here to facilitate the conversation between the two geniuses that are joining us on the panel today. So look, we're going to go through the 5 top tips to turbocharge your analytics. And really, the first one's really around aligning its business goals, identifying natural champions, bringing your data together, use the stop doing to drive new action. I think that's, I mean, they're all really important. That one's, I think, often overlooked, and keeping an eye on the future. So we might just jump into it. So aligning analytics with business goals, like this is a big one. From a product standpoint, like we sort of spend a lot of time building dashboards and things for organizations, making sure that or providing dashboards that are out of the box. But what we often see is all of them need to be tailored to the business. Paul, can I throw my first question to you? Before you began on this journey, what did it look like within your organizations without a source of truth? And what were the first practical steps you took to connect your analytics to the work goals and that the business actually cared about?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. Just a bit of background to start with on MYOB. So we provide a suite of business management solutions to over 500,000 businesses across Australia and New Zealand. And we offer things like accounting support, payroll, inventory, and financial services. We have a contact center of around 300 staff. We handle around 500,000 interactions a year, mainly with customers who need help using our software. So yeah, going back to Scott's question, we have been on a bit of a journey. So if I think back probably 18 months ago, we didn't really have a source of truth in terms of understanding how we were performing. We were sort of doing DIY reporting, I guess you would describe it as. We had analysts and leaders exhausting a lot of manual effort to construct views of our performance, and quite often the results and numbers were conflicting. We even had a situation where we use a third-party vendor to help deliver our services, and we were in a situation where the vendor was telling us how they were performing as we had no effective way of measuring it ourselves. So that was a bit of a dangerous situation. Performance meeting conversations were mostly spent just trying to work out what happened, not so much talking about how to solve things. We didn't really understand who or why customers were contacting us, and our results were poor. A lot of we weren't hitting our metrics, and we were in a bit of a bad way. So we did a bit of a reset, and we got clear on what we wanted. We wanted a centralized dashboard with trusted data. We wanted it fully automated, and we wanted it to be the go-to for every leader when they clocked on to work. So everyone knew when they clocked on for the day how we performed the day before. And that's when we engaged Customer Science Group, because we identified that we needed some help to do this. And we needed some help to organize our Genesys data into a consumable structure. And we wanted to integrate that data into our data warehouse. The other thing we did is employed a highly capable analyst to help us build a world-class dashboard, leveraging the data that Customer Science Group sort of brought to life for us. The other thing that we did, if I think back to those days, we were relying on a centralized data and analytics team within MYOB to deliver our reporting. We made the decision to move that in-house, so and service it from our customer experience team. So what we wanted was being pushed down the pecking order with other things in the business. So we took it upon ourselves to deliver it within our own team. So I guess that's something worth considering.
Well, just a quick question then. With the customer experience piece, like moving analytics into customer experience, did you find that then gave the analytics guys more oversight around the priorities that the customer experience team were trying to drive? Is that the kind of
Yes.
alignment that it drove? Yeah.
Yes, it did. We needed that focus, and we needed a bit more control.
Yep.
And that's the call that we made. And I guess Genesys provides, what we learned is Genesys provides realms of data, right? And it can be easy to get sort of lost in it. So when we embarked on this sort of dashboard, we anchored the structure of it around our hero metrics, 3 hero metrics, which you'll see on the slide here to the top right, as service level. So how quickly do we answer our customer inquiries, first call resolution, and customer satisfaction. So we targeted those 3 things as our anchors, and then we developed supporting insights around those things to tell a story.
That's really interesting. So those hero metrics, were they already a common language within the organization, or were these things that you arrived at because you could marry them to an outcome for MYOB?
I think they existed, but I think what we were trying to do is measure lots and lots of things,
mm-hmm.
and perhaps getting a little bit lost. So we brought these 3 things to the top right, and we just made these our 3 priorities,
mm-hmm.
and that just helped us be a bit more targeted in our conversations, and also about how we sort of develop the reporting around it.
I think that's really clever, right? So aligning the metrics piece with business goals is actually simplifying it at a top line piece that everybody can then. It's easier to digest 3 numbers than it is 30, right? So, but if you've got those 30 that slot into the 3, it's easy to expand people's aware or scale the awareness and and align activity across different lines of business. I think it's really smart. Fong, just from your side, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see organisations make when it comes to aligning analytics to business goals? And what are some of the things that business leaders should think about?
Yeah, sure. I think Paul gave a really good example of one of those, which is just having too many KPIs, right? It's really easy when you have all this data, and we have all this data that we can have, and usually the first thing that people do is we want to show all of it. So I think that's probably the biggest mistake that happens in general. So obviously, when you have too many of those measures or KPIs, you kind of dilute that focus and you lose that alignment. So which ultimately just weakens the actual impact of the analytics to actually drive any behavioral change or outcomes that your organization want. So analytics really only creates that value when it's really aligned to what the strategic objectives are, and then how that flows down to the actual teams who are delivering services or support services, and the work to the front line, right? So another one is making it simple so people can actually understand and it's meaningful and they can actually apply it to what they do every day, and then that helps to have that impact to that overall strategy where you go there. So I think the other one also is around touching back on, we got all this data, and usually people say, yep, let's just report on everything, and then that dilution. So you really want to flip that question around to what actual decisions that we need to make every day that really impacts and would make it better, faster, provide better service, be more confident around decision making, and flip it around in that sense, so that you're really focused on what are the key things that you really want answered, really going to tell you how you're going. Usually we call those like the metrics that matter.
I think
And those are aligned.
That's really clear. I like that, because everyone, so often we hear people, you're starting out a new initiative like this, and you hear people, the first question you often hear is, what data have we got? As opposed to asking the question, what decision do we want to make? I think it makes complete sense of flipping it around a bit. That's great, guys. And also, people listening, if you've got questions or thoughts, feel free to throw them into the chat. Very keen to, all comments as well. Right? Quite often there's expertise everywhere. The next one that we've got is really around identifying natural champions. Now, Paul, you had to bring people with you as you learned from scratch, right? So you established something from it was a new capability, it was new insights, and there was a real change process that had to exist, like to sort of work in parallel in order to get people to start to utilize that data. Who emerged as the champions within your organization, and how did you kind of shift people away from their old practices of, say, billing in Excel into new methods of working?
Yeah, we needed to change the culture a little bit. So as I sort of mentioned, we sort of had this do-it-yourself reporting situation where people rightly felt like they needed to piece their own story together to trust what they were looking at. So as well as developing the solutions, we needed to change the culture. So there's a couple of things we did. Firstly, as we were building this out, we made sure we brought stakeholders along the journey, making sure to help us validate the outputs in the new dashboard. So there was lots of collaboration, iterating the dash as the story started to come together. So people were building confidence in the metrics and data that we were providing. The other thing we did is we targeted a person who loved his Excel version of events and initially was somewhat resistant to letting go of that. I think he's on the call today, so cheerio to you, Steve. And we worked closely with him to build trust. So we sort of identified data hungry, influential people in the business like Steve to help us change the behaviors and the culture. So we brought him on board and he was great. He embraced it. And as he sort of started to make that change in how he operates, others started to follow and the culture started to shift. And very quickly, the dashboard that we built became the go-to Bible where people now go to understand how we are performing, rather than that situation where people were off going and creating their own version of the facts. Everyone now goes to that one spot, which just makes conversations and decision making a whole lot smoother.
It's I think every organization has those people that are sort of heavily invested in Excel, right? And we have these webs of Excel of cascading information from spreadsheet to spreadsheet. And it is a struggle. From your standpoint, mate, why is it often the informal influencers rather than the senior leaders that sort of champion the shift in culture?
Yeah, I think everyone has been through that before, when things do get pushed down, but if you don't have the right champions, it doesn't really stick. And that's because champions are really important. They're like the cultural engine, right, to actually deliver on your data strategy. So like the magic happens when not just senior people, but just people in general are empowered and feel empowered to be able to influence, to be able to do, right? So you can just have a look at this matrix here. Look at two main things here. Is the appetite for insight, and as Paul said, it's the people who are interested, and the high impact on outcomes, and who actually does something about it. So probably those are the two biggest factors that help you to identify who are your champions, and that don't have to always be senior. So the people who feel the most pain, the ones who have to lose hours of work because the data's not right, or have to do it manually and all that kind of stuff. They're probably the ones that are going to really help you to drive that adoption of this more organically. From an influencer point of view, sometimes it is more the informal influences. So it's the one that it's not around the role or the person, or sorry, not the role. It's around more around where do you go to? Who do you always ask when something doesn't look right? You need to, find out why that is, right? So that person is really critical because they can really shift that behavior really fast because they're trusted and people go to them for advice. And I think the last thing I'll say is teams don't have to be the technical people. It doesn't have to be the data engineer. It doesn't have to be the analyst, right? It's probably the people, who are best at explaining things, who can translate, right, the complicated to the simple, and help people to get the insight every day.
Nice. So then the sort of brings us to the next one, which is about bringing data together. With a lot of the stuff that we've been doing, Fong, you've been instrumental in this, right? Is when we look at just even within a single data source, being Genesys in this instance, the boards that you've built have been really fascinating because what you've actually done is you've got our real-time data of what's happening within our customer contact centers. But then what you've also then done is you've blended it in with the historical data. So what that then unlocks is this ability to have a look at, okay, so where are we up to now in the real time compared to historical, and for things like forecast, where did we think that would be up to? So you can see the orange and the green bits in the demand trend. So you can see when we're above average or below average, which really has a significant impact in enabling or shortening the time to insight. From Fong, just if I start with you, from your experience, you often say silos killed trust. Why is unifying data such a turning point for organizations, and where should they focus first when they're trying to build that source of truth?
Yeah, I think we all know, we've all had that pain when, you have a business question to answer, but you don't have the right data to actually confidently say yes or no, or understand what's actually going on. All right. So without that kind of shared source of truth, reporting doesn't provide the insight and the impact that you want. And a lot of the times it actually brings up a lot more questions, right? And you start to kill that trust because I'm sure you sat in the room saying, oh, we've come to this meeting and people have different numbers, and then you spend the time saying, well, I don't know what's right. Right. And half the time it's just trying to figure that out and get alignment. And you may even leave there saying, more confused than you went in with. So that's not the only impact on that. Obviously, it wastes time, it drains your resources, you burn your cash, your money, and you basically slow down and people lose confidence. And that has some big impacts into how to meet your organizational goals or outcomes that you're looking to have. So really unifying that gives everyone kind of the right starting point, right? So you can have the right conversations because you trust the data, it's there. You're singing from the same hymn book. It's not, some other figure that's translated in some other way and measured in some other way. It's all kind of unified in that way, and decisions then come faster, cleaner, and become more effective. But I think a big one of this one, because this is not an easy job, right? Unifying data is not easy, right? So you don't want to just do it all at once either, because that could be a big risk as well. So I think a few things that I would say, tips to start with is you don't have to do everything at once. Just like we talked about in the alignment of the business outcomes. Look at those first. What are the metrics that matter? What's the data that matters? That are critical, that drive those metrics, and just start with those, right? And start to build from there and iterate from there. I think also data governance and data quality then also comes into it as well. So if you can prioritize data quality and getting definitions down early, because that gives you a nice foundation around that trust, because it's got good quality definitions. So you're speaking the same language, right? But also not suffocating it. So you don't want to bring this big data governance thing all over the top of it, and you're just going to suffocate the whole thing. Iterate as you go. Start off light. Start off with what you need, and then iterate from there, and when you start getting those insights, obviously you celebrate them. I think that's really important too, to go, this is working, this is really good, and then start taking those next steps.
Yeah, we're going to get into celebrating insights. Paul, from your side though, when you started bringing Genesys data in with your Salesforce data, or systems like Salesforce, like what new visibility did that create, and what impact did it have having a single trusted view for your teams?
Yeah, we took a similar approach to what Fong sort of described there. I think the first thing we did is when we structured the data in our data warehouse, we structured it at a really granular level. So one conversation with a customer equaled one row of data. So we really brought it back. All the aggregations and calculations and stuff we did in Power BI, but the data we were using to power those dashboards, we took it down to that real granular level so that then we can append other data points within our data warehouse to those conversations. So we use Salesforce. So we were able to sort of start to bring, over time, as we iterated, bring some customer data from Salesforce into those dashboards. So as an example, we added a custom field into Genesys that enabled our team members to enter the case number in Salesforce for each interaction they handled. And what that enabled us to do is then link the case number in Genesys to the case in Salesforce and create that connection. And that meant we then knew who the customer was in that interaction. So when we did that, over time, we've been able to improve our customer identification on interactions from 30% up to 90%. So knowing who the customer was one of our real pain points a few years back, and as we brought that process in and able to create that link, we can now bring in a lot of customer specific information into our dashboards, such as what products the customer is using. Customer tenure is a big one for us. So being able to understand where customers are in the journey and then why are they contacting us. And that's just led to better insights and more focused actions. The more data that you can kind of link to those conversations, it just opens the door to do more insights and helps sort of propel a business and make better tactical decisions.
I think that's often overlooked in terms of the value that contact centers offer into organizations. You see quite often, particularly within marketing areas, they're often talking about the pains they have to go through to get data on authenticated users or authenticated interactions. But if you've got 90%, it was 90%.
That's where we're at now, yeah.
That's insane. Like that's really good. So you've got 90% of your interactions are now with authenticated customers, be it one way or another. That is a huge treasure trove of data that has implications for things like retention and all that sort of stuff. Like there's huge value in that data now. That's really, really impressive. Definitely worth it from like a really major unlock. I think the next bit to moving on from there, I think once you got that insight, this one here, this is one of my personally most things I think is one of the most important. It's using the stop doings to drive new action. And the reason why this one's in here is, in particular, what we often see is these kinds of initiatives or moving up maturity, it's often viewed as just doing more work on top of your existing work. And one of the things we often hear is, I'd love to do all this, but I've got a day job. And so I think one of the things that's overlooked through this process is the stop doings that you get to stop doing as you sort of trundle up that maturity cycle that we we're talking about before. Paul, if I can throw to you, once you had the right insights in place, along with your traffic light system, how did that shift your team's energy from a sort of a reporting perspective into improving performance? What did that look like for you guys?
Apologies for the bright lights showing on the screen now, but that's just a snapshot of what our reporting sort of looked like a few years ago. You can see there's numbers everywhere, a lot of them red. But what happened when we sort of moved to using these new dashboards is the focus shifted to what is and isn't working right now. And that's where we were focusing our attention on, rather than trying to work out what's going on. What's going on now is easy to understand, not like this screen you're looking at here. It's easy to interpret and readily available. So leaders spend a few minutes absorbing the material each morning, and then they go into action on what we need to do to drive change. Our operational meetings, we used to have a 2-hour operational meeting a week, and most of that time was working out what happened. If I look at our operational meetings today, we spend about 30 minutes a fortnight talking about our performance. And that's because everyone's the visibility's there, and we're purely talking about action and not so much trying to work out what happened. And as we've made this transition, our results have turned from red to green. A lot of our metrics are green now, so our performance is uplifted. Leaders are getting more valuable time back because they're not needing to spend that time piecing the things together, and they've got better insights so they can make better decisions. So we've seen continuous improvement in our results. And when we do have sort of that inevitable dip or something catches fire, we know about it really quickly because we've got really clean, easy to consume information available to us so that we can see it quickly and act quickly.
It sounds really like, if I stitch it together, the things that you've said so far, like what you've really done is you've democratized data within MYOB. So you started with those hero metrics at the top. You've focused in on the people that are actually trying to use data to get jobs done, to build that sort of that champion network and that feedback loop. You've brought together the data that supports that view, and which sounds very simple, right? But the ramifications of that are and because it's now democratized and people are singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, there's a lot less conversation that needs to occur because people are just busy getting stuff done now. They're busy improving the metrics that matter. And I think that's hugely powerful. Fong, you talk a lot about sort of the report graveyard. So how should, say, an organisation that's sort of stuck in the early stages of, say, I don't know, is sort of married into large levels of Excel, et cetera, how should organisation approach identifying and retiring low value reporting so they can free up that capacity for real improvement?
So I'll put my hand up and guilty as charged of building every single dashboard that anyone has ever asked an analytics team to build. And you know, you think you're being helpful, right? You're helping people get what they want. You're producing all these reports and dashboards that they really, really need. But fast forward a couple of years and you find yourself with hundreds of dashboards that take time, obviously, to update. And then that's time taken away from your team to deliver these dashboards. But are they actually useful? And that's that concept of the report graveyard. So I think everyone probably in the industry has probably been there before, where you have a monthly report that takes you a whole day to produce, and it gets looked at for 30 seconds, right? Maybe it doesn't even drive the right insight or conversation that you really need, and probably takes way too long for it to be produced. So if you can skip to the next slide, please, Scott.
Yep. There we go.
This is just an example of a dashboard audit cycle that we've implemented before and recommended our customers to take in. Like, not rocket science, but it's not just about reports either and dashboards. It's also about metrics too. Okay, so like step one is just auditing what's being used or not. Look at utilization. Who's touching those reports? Who's actually using those? And that can be a really key indicator to say, hey, do you really need that? Is it the right reports that you need? Right. So If we can stop doing those that aren't being used or aren't useful and are not been, I've again been guilty of building reports and half of them don't even get opened. So what a waste of time, right? So you move into step 2 is more around, okay, great, let's think about it and let's look at retiring some of these ones. So fewer dashboards also means more clarity, so you don't, as a, I don't know, team leader, operations manager, whatever your role is, you don't have, you don't want to go to hundreds or, dozens of different reports to get what you want. You want to go to the one report that has everything, or the few reports that have what you need and allow you to analyze that data, get the insight you want and take action like Paul has done at MYOB. Third step is also refreshing what matters. So what things change, right? And the world we live in, it's very dynamic. Environments change very quickly, trends change very quickly. So keeping up to speed with that is actually really important. The metric that you needed a year ago may not be the one you need right now. Your processes might have changed, so the way that you've delivered a dashboard may not make a lot of sense to your people anymore, and may not be aligned to the ways that they work. So it's really important to make sure we refresh those, whether that is a dashboard or a metric themselves. So sometimes you got to retire a metric, or you need to change the way that you measure that as well. And that ultimately what that gives you is time back. You get that time back from your analytics teams and from the people in your business to actually reinvest into innovation. I think that's something we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, I think, and it's such an overlooked point, right? Is that what can we stop doing is the thing that provides the space, the energy, and often the money to drive the new things. So the innovation piece. It's a really overlooked piece, I think, piece of the puzzle. Just moving on to the fifth is keeping an eye on the future. So we are obviously, it's all good once it's set up and you've got the hero metrics and the champions and things are working. But we don't live in a static environment, especially now, right? We've got AI that's just sort of exploding in all sorts of areas, and that is radically changing not just what we measure, but what's possible, right? And with those new possibilities and new methods of orchestration that we could potentially never have imagined really beforehand, it really is calling for a new horizon of measurement and a different discipline around how we use our data. Paul, you've built strong foundations, right? But how do you think about the next wave, like things like segmentation, bot effectiveness, churn indicators, that sort of stuff? How are you guys keeping abreast of the things that are happening in market today that are going to have a material impact in your business going forward?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I'll mention a couple of things that we're looking at developing, and one of the things on the screen is something that's sort of in progress. But I'm also curious as to what the audience are focusing on as well. So feel free to throw some things in the chat if there are particular things that you're sort of wanting to report on next year. But one of the things that we've sort of identified is we spend a lot of time, as I've sort of spoken about, understanding how our human workforce is performing, but probably don't spend enough time analyzing the performance of our bots. So we have a chat bot. This dashboard that you're looking at here is something that we're sort of working on to better understand how our bots are serving our customers, because our bots handle a lot of interactions, and we want to get underneath that a bit more so that we can make sure that the customer's getting a great experience. So you can see on the dashboard here, we're measuring things like fallout, so how many interactions with our bots end up being handled or diverted to a human to answer. But we want to really dive into this a bit more and understand those specific customer journeys that people are going on. And Genesys does have a lot of data around this that the customer science group are helping us with. There's a lot of stuff there. It's about how do we bring it to life in a consumable way that leaders can understand. Like, we're not all AI experts. I certainly aren't, but we need to be able to consume what's going on in this new world. And I think part of our role as analysts is to make it easy to understand what's happening in that sort of complex environment. So that's a big focus for us. The other thing is, a big focus for MYOB next year is around customer segmentation and how can we provide, tailored experiences to customers. So going back to tenure, looking at what kind of experiences are our customers having in their first 90 days as a customer. What are those adoption pain points? Like we can now report on that stuff and really focus in on why are customers calling in that sort of initial period. Is there anything we can do to help that onboarding experience? And also on the flip side, when customers churn or decide to leave MYOB, what are those trigger points? What are those lead up events that we could better understand? I think in a session yesterday, I think Andrew from Customer Science mentioned that 91% of people change providers because of one bad experience, right? In their way of life, whether it's with their electricity or their insurance. So we want to understand, are our customers having some of those bad experiences that may be leading them to make a decision to leave MYOB? So we want to get under the hood a little bit more with that. So all the data is there for us to be able to do this. Our challenge is to, again, just bring it to life with easily to consume dashboards.
Nice. Thanks, Paul. And Fong, just as a, I want to open the floor in a minute to people and get questions or comments or thoughts. I mean, you're working across a lot of organisations at the moment. Many of them are grappling with how to roll out AI and those sorts of things into their environment. What are some of the things that you are learning about in terms of measuring this next horizon?
Yeah, I think as everyone knows, the BI landscape, especially around AI, is going at 100 miles an hour. So you got co-pilots coming out of your ears, analytics and bots and automated QAs to summaries and all the rest of it. I think the trap here is that, and I think we live in a cool age, right? We've got all these cool shiny toys. We can do a lot with them. It's like 1,001 kind of use cases, but you can't chase every trend as it comes, right? That's it's not going to work. You're going to spread yourself too thin. So my advice generally is around make sure you're ready, right? And sometimes that's more foundational, right? So you don't need to use every single model that you set out there, every single AI tool, but just be ready for it, right? And readiness really comes down to, do you have really good data? Is it clean? Is it of good quality? And I think you'll know the whole adage of garbage is garbage out. You can have the cool AI tool, but if you don't have the right data of the right quality, it'll probably give you the wrong answer as well. So I think that's critical. Having the right people, and that's difficult too. Having the right people who are ready for that, are confident, to be able to implement that when you're ready is also important. The second one, I think is also, it's easy to get caught up with the technology, right? Because it's so cool. You can do so many things. You can do all this stuff with it. But what we really want to look at is, don't think about the technology first. Think about the use cases. Start with the use case, and then have the technology should follow. So instead of saying, we want AI, it's what are the things we want to fix? What's hard? What's painful around our process that we want to automate, predict better, have better insights on, make better decisions on? Those are the things that are going to really, really help, your trajectory and get there really fast. So if I talk about just like overall approach, sorry, I'll go back. The example I'll give there is, we want AI. Let's go and do stuff. We want to do like some predictive analytics and do some cool stuff. But we don't have correctly defined what are we trying to do. So it's a very scattergun approach to it, and you usually end up with so what was the impact? Don't know. Didn't measure it. Didn't know what the success criteria was, and didn't know what good looked like. So from an approach, if I was to go from there, focus on literacy and readiness before the actual technology. Really focus on those use cases and track those use cases. when you do it, definitely use an agile approach. So run really fast, fail fast if you need to, but make it safe at the same time, because we all know there's a lot of traps that come to that. So how do you do it really iteratively, MVP style, make it safe so you know that it works from a proof of concept point of view. And then once you do that and you're ready for that, make it modular too. So don't spend your time redoing things from scratch. Modularize everything. Make sure it can be reused in your architecture, so you can plug and play things when it comes to AI features. And a lot of the time when you start to do that and have join these different modules together that you build, you actually get even better insights.
Nice, guys. Yeah, the just being future ready is on everybody's sort of radar at the moment with all the changes that are going on. We had one customer we're working with recently that was looking to measure the impact of their co-pilots, and we're doing it in a way that they've been recommended to do, which is basically comparing queues with Copilot versus those without. And very quickly, what became very apparent was not a particularly good way to do it, right? You can't do an A/B test of something that's not there versus something in this instance. So what we reorientated the measurements to be was the sort of queues before Copilot versus a queue after, and that then offered a point of perspective to actually measure the impact. But there's all sorts of stuff that we're seeing around this as well, around just the experiments that people are choosing. Quite often, like one, for instance, we had one, we're trying out Copilot on a queue that had long-standing staff, and seeing what was the impact of Copilot on those guys. And in fact, the answer was not much. It's because they didn't, like, it was around next best decisioning around or suggested articles and things like that. And the realistically it was the wrong audience, because they already knew that stuff, and presenting those articles was actually more of an annoyance than a benefit. So I think it's really getting clear around what is the role of AI, like you're saying there, Guy, Fong, and what kind of improvement or uplift are we looking to drive, guys? Look, I want to throw it open. I think that's enough, certainly from us. But are there any comments or questions or thoughts or abuse even from the crowd, from the audience? Very keen to hear any thoughts or any thoughts from this, or comments like, what are you guys experiencing? Is there any of the stuff that we've covered today that you've seen in your environments, or I don't know if you're able to talk or not. Okay, but people able to come off mute, or is it best to use the chat in this instance?
Just the chat for this one.
The chat? Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll give people a chance to put their thoughts together, Scott.
Yeah.
If I could just fill in a bit of time while everyone's thinking as well, a few bonus items, if you will, allow me, is also, I think, didn't make the list, but making things accessible is actually quite important too, and make it easy and simple to use. Sounds simple to do, but it's hard to do. But like people don't want to. That's like the biggest blocker to like adoption, right? When you make it hard for people to get to the data, when they're made to feel, I guess, stupid. I'm just going to say that, right? It doesn't really help. So building right, architecture, the dashboards that kind of make it a conversation, are fit for the right audience, are kind of aligned with their day-to-day work, can actually be a very, very important kind of factor in moving that forward.
Thanks, Fong. Hey guys, I'm going to take silence as golden. I'll give it another sort of 10 seconds, but I'm going to assume that that today's was so comprehensive that everyone got what they needed and there's no questions. If you do want to reach out to us afterwards, it's no problem at all. Oh, hang on, I'll come back to that. You can reach out to us through customerscience.com.au. We're all on LinkedIn if you want to reach out to us. But just want to I'll just say a quick just thank you, especially to you, Paul, for making time today, and Fong as well. Really appreciate your input and helping cobble this together. Yeah, but if there's any other questions, if there's not any other questions, we can leave it. The other thing, Fong, there's an opportunity to get a report around, what is the maturity of what is the maturity of your reporting currently, and for those that are interested, feel free to scan the QR code. But aside from that, guys, I might doff our collective hats and say, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate you making time. Hope you found it valuable. And if you do have questions, please reach out. Or if you want to connect or on LinkedIn, you've got our details hopefully in the invite, I think. If not, I'll send out this deck to the people that registered and just say thanks to everyone for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Is there
Okay.